Megadeth is one of the most influential metal bands of all time. To date, the band has released 15 studio albums, selling over 38 million copies worldwide. Guitarist and vocalist Dave Mustaine is not only the driving force behind Megadeth, but he was also an integral part of the foundation of Metallica. Dave Mustaine was Metallica's original lead guitarist up until the spring of 1983. In the spring of '83, Metallica traveled from California to New York in order to record their debut record. However, on April 11th of '83, Dave Mustaine was famously kicked out of Metallica. Kirk Hammett arrived in New York later that same day and replaced Dave Mustaine. Although no longer in Metallica, Dave's time in Metallica left a lasting impression on the band's music. There are 10 songs on Metallica's debut record Kill 'Em All. Dave Mustaine received songwriting credit on 4 of those songs. There are 8 songs on Metallica's second record, Ride the Lightning. Dave received songwriting credit on 2 of those songs. Even so, Dave Mustaine resented the fact that Metallica used guitar parts that he wrote. After being kicked out of the band, Dave Mustaine swore that he would take revenge on Metallica by forming a band that was faster and heavier than them. During the bus ride back home to Los Angeles in April of '83, Dave Mustaine came across a pamphlet by California Senator Alan Cranston that read, quote, "The arsenal of Megadeth can't be rid no matter what the peace treaties come to." Dave Mustaine took a liking to the term Megadeth and slightly altered the spelling. Back in LA, Dave Mustaine started a band with his new neighbors, bassist David Ellefson and guitarist Greg Handevidt, 2 musicians originally from Minnesota. Greg Handevidt only remained in the band for a few months, while David Ellefson, on the other hand, became an integral part of the band and remains so to this day. Since Megadeth's formation in 1983, the band has had a total of 23 different band members. Some members, of course, had more of an impact on the band than others. I was fortunate enough to be able to interview 3 members of Megadeth who had significant contributions to the band: Chris Poland, Nick Menza, and James LoMenzo. I've listed the contributions each of them made to Megadeth in the description box below. In the interview I did with James LoMenzo, he is accompanied by his friend Brent Woods, a successful musician in his own right. During my interviews with Chris, Nick, and James, I asked them questions about a variety of different topics. These interviews were all conducted for my documentary, What is Classic Rock? If you would like to see the full documentary, the links are available in the description box below. Everything I do is completely original, so if you like my work, make sure to subscribe for more.
All right, peace.
It was a pleasure, man.
Thanks, man.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
I'm glad that we did it today because you made us come down and set up, and now we're ready to go.
I would define classic rock as being anything that's older than 20, 30 years from today. I guess you could say I'm classic rock because I'm older than 30. The internet, like the interweb, has totally destroyed the whole industry on a lot of areas besides just music. The studios, the bands, you can't sell records anymore. I mean, something needs to change and turn around again where the bands are not being exploited and giving their music away for free, which kind of sucks, you know? It's like you work all these years to get, put out an album, and then your album comes out and you give it away for free, so it's kind of disheartening, The industry is so backwards now. Everything has changed. The record business is, what record business? Rock is totally not dead, and it'll always be there, prominent in the business, and you got to do what you love and keep doing it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
Recently, a lot of classic rock stations have been playing music from the 90s and 2000s to expand their playlist. In your mind, would that suggest that the traditional definition of classic rock is evolving?
You're talking about bands like Nirvana and Bush and stuff like that. I think all of that stuff is actually very blues-based, but I don't think that classic rock is dead. I just think that would be the new definition of where rock is. I think what we're waiting for is the next thing. Just like how when Nirvana came out, they were the thing, and that's been beaten into the ground now, and so everybody's waiting for what's next, you know. And what's next is always like, you know, like Nirvana, they shopped all over the place and nobody wanted them until, you know, somebody finally picked them up, and look at what happened. There's definitely, it's going to happen. Who it's going to be and how it's going to sound, I couldn't tell you, because I would have never guessed that Nirvana was going to be that, you know. People my age, we grew up on Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones and Hendrix and Jeff Beck and, you know, Mountain, Leslie West. I believe that there's going to be another hard rock band that's going to be huge again, because people love music and people love rock. I don't think the record companies are doing bands any big favors, especially nowadays, because I don't think the labels know exactly what to do with what's happening with the internet, and especially like people ripping music, and you know, it's a different time. Well, it's a business, and you know, and they're out to make money, and it used to be different. They used to take a band and they would nurture that band. They would release their first record and they'd let the band grow, and they'd give them, you know, time to grow and become whatever it is they're going to become. Nowadays, it's like, it's you either got it or you don't. And then if they release your record and nothing happens, they drop you, you know. So I think it's almost better for bands nowadays to just do it themselves with the internet, and the only way to make it today, and making it means, you know, being able to pay, you know, your mortgage and your car insurance and make a living, is to go out on the road and play. You got to play a lot on the road.
Where does that line between hard rock and heavy metal begin?
Metal is just way more just intense, and like I'll use Metallica for instance. Like if you listen to And Justice for All, and then you listen to a hard rock band, it's a totally different thing. You know, a hard rock band is really blues-based, singing about, you know, some girl's ass, where Metallica is like super heavy, very complicated, and, you know, singing about totally different stuff, you know. And then there's extreme metal. That and hard rock have nothing to do with each other.
When I started this thing in the 80s, quick example, okay, I joined this band White Lion. We went overseas to do a record. We came back, we got our record all done. I came back here to California, finished the record up. Brought it into the label, just about to get started on our van tour, you know, hit the East Coast. And they had a Christmas party, Atlantic Records did. So we got put on our best metal suits and went in to meet everybody. And I shook hands with this guy, and he goes, "You're James LoMenzo." And I was shocked that anybody even knew my name at that time in their corporate offices. And he introduced himself as an accounts manager and a guy who basically looked at, you know, the money coming and going and what was going to happen. He goes, "White Lion, right?" I said, "Yeah, that's right." He goes, "Oh, you guys are going to be fine." And that really, I mean, just the way he dismissively, quickly told me, "You guys are going to be fine."
You guys are a priority.
Right. I had no idea why he would even have a crystal ball to know that, but I knew something was afoot. So 6 months later, we do sell 500,000 copies of our record. And, you know, I had no idea we were in a van tour. I didn't know we were selling that many records. Got calls from back home saying, "I can't believe you're on MTV every day." And, you know, back then when you toured, you went to a hotel room that had cable limited, like
Right.
4 channels of
Maybe
cable.
HBO,
Yeah, right,
if you're
right.
lucky.
Right. And so we didn't see ourselves. I had no idea that anything was going on. Like,
Right.
more people were coming to the clubs. That's
Right.
all I knew. But anyway, they used to basically create, you know, their success based on what they put in the bank, being the bands.
Now, you know, you get pop artists that are just getting songs written by other people, and it's not really about a camaraderie of members of a band that are putting it together and putting them on the road for a couple of years and you know, giving them a shot at maybe failing on the first 2 records like it used to be, and building an audience, building a fan base. You kind of have to do it on your own now, which is okay, but it's different when you don't have that machine. Everybody has a problem with, the corporate, label and, thinking it's bad. But, at the end of the day, it is a business, and, you need to have an investment to gain popularity and to stay on the road and to, pay for a van and a trailer and everything else to keep you out there to promote.
But I do think that that the corporate entity over the years has diluted their own ability to actually find talent. The music is certainly more contrived. You don't have that one singular voice anymore, because that one singular voice has been auto-tuned to death to make sure that it's as competitive as all the other, people who are auto-tuned to death. The music is put directly on a grid to make it nice and easy and consumable, for both the engineer putting it together and the producer putting it together and the record label. So the music's become so homogenized, I don't see an environment where we can make anything that we can call classic rock in the next 20 years, because it's not from, I think that same spirit of innovation is missing.
Well, it's soulless.
Yeah, well, it's been, raked out and it's always been about revenue, let's not kid ourselves. But the products, it's kind of like, back when we could grow corn and, lettuce and all that, we figured out better ways to grow corn cheaper and get more to more people and put more things in to make sure that we could make more of it at the detriment of people. I think that's where we're at right now with music. I think they've just figured out ways to optimize the output without really keeping the nutritional value.
Well, it's exactly like food, right? Basically the music nowadays is like GMOs and fruits and vegetables, and that's what it is.
Yes, I think it's a good analogy to our culture. We're valuing quantity and, disposability to move on to the next thing quickly. And, that's not a nurturing environment for anything that you can call classic. Your genius is going to pop out from everywhere, and I would hope that some of them, could be new musicians, and maybe they're out there.
But they don't pop out immediately sometimes.
They should not.
Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 records and years of touring to actually develop.
Jimi Hendrix was just hitting the clubs and playing until he became who he became.
Bruce Springsteen, Prince. There's a million guys.
So the question is, how can I think maybe the answer is that the record industry, short-sightedly, and I love them because I made a lot of money working with them, but short-sightedly didn't see the wall coming. The wall being, the accessibility of digital media. So here's where we're at now. We have to make more efficient recordings which have nothing to do with the soul and the innovation that we love about classic rock music as we know it right now. Classic rock was, to me, it was a convenient term to package the music to a new audience, right? They didn't start describing it as classic rock until the 80s. As far as I can recall.
You're right.
Billboard was trying to say, okay, that's what this is,
Classic rock station.
Yeah, and I think it was geared towards an audience that was getting older and that they were still buying products and listening to the radio. Remember the radio? The radio was great.
Some of it.
Yeah, some of it. No, actually, most. NEW in New York, 60s, 70s. I probably learned more about music through the DJs on those stations who weren't that beholden to the advertisers than I, probably have, searching out all this music myself. I think most of the designation of classic rock, to me, still kind of locks it up because that's the only reason we call it that now. But I think it's kind of cool that it has a designated term, and it almost has a respect by calling it classic rock.
Yeah, they just threw rock at the end of it.
Nice, as opposed to shitty rock. In my outlook on the music, it really kind of extends itself into the mid-70s and then kind of dies off after that. As soon as the progressive movement starts to fizzle out, that's, for me, where classic rock technically kind of slows down. Because I think as a complete genre, production-wise, musicianship-wise, creativity, everything then was kind of mostly blues-based. Even if you listen to a lot of even Genesis and Yes, you listen to a lot of the things they were doing, those were still steeped in some kind of a blues motif, even though they kind of took it a little further out and they introduced elements of jazz and esoterica into what they're writing. I kind of came up in the mid-'80s, and looking back at a lot of the music that started from, like, let's say, well, I guess you could say Bruce Springsteen and
Pre-'80s
Boston,
Bruce.
Right?
That's
Still at the tail of the 70s. It really doesn't. I mean, even though they carried over into that, as far as the sound of classic rock, what we expect to hear, the production of classic rock, it kind of still lives in the 70s. To me, it doesn't really extend itself.
And that's exactly the way I feel it. But I think it's the generation too. When you were born and the demographics of your music. And to me, the 80s is not classic rock. It kind of, but maybe that was because it was my generation of actually starting to really play in bands and playing out live and creating my own music. So for me, classic rock has always been 60s and 70s.
I think there's something to classic heavy metal, but we're talking about another genre. I don't think it necessarily, it crosses over, it doesn't sit in the same pantheon of classic rock. I think classic rock is still severely blues-based, right? It's one honest voice, like the guy,
right.
whoever's singing has that honest blues man's voice.
It's not as dark.
Yeah, and lyrically, I think once we start kind of straddling the comic book world of heavy metal, which is basically what a lot of early stuff is, where they start talking about more spectral things like, darker notions and supernatural things.
Right.
But the point is heavy metal, classic heavy metal, throughout the 70s and into the early 80s, is that considered a classic rock movement as well?
It's hard for me because, it's not that I care about aging myself, but it always seemed that the classic rock was the 70s, and the Zeppelin,
right?
Like I said, the Neil Young, that type of stuff was
right.
always kind of the category of classic rock.
So I get one honest voice, one honest guitar amp, one honest drum set in the room, as opposed to a super
Classic
produced.
metal is different.
Is it when they start stripping away the blues element to it? Where do you start to distinguish what's metal and what's hard rock?
Well, Sabbath still had the blues, and they were heavy as hell.
They really did something. Something about their tone. Black Sabbath had a more preponderance in the forwardness of all their tones. Right, everything was pushed a lot more forward than even Led Zeppelin of the time. Right, Led Zeppelin had. It's kind of hard to believe like that kind of bombastic assault that Led Zeppelin had musically. But it was, it certainly was a little more demure as opposed to listening to the dual overdubs and tuned down sound like Tommy Iommi,
exactly.
Right? I think it had more to do with tonality in that case. I think eventually, just like all the old blues, all the blues rockers that we love, like Led Zeppelin, borrowed from Jimi Hendrix and borrowed from this guy and that guy. I think the same thing happened certainly with heavy metal in that they kind of picked and chose what they liked. I think one of the defining moments in heavy metal, for me anyway, and it's an early song that I played as a young player learning how to play with other people in bands, was Smoke on the Water. Because it was almost like, if you listen to that song, the way it's constructed, it starts out with the guitar riff with the tone, even though there's a keyboard playing along with that, right? And it just has that bombastic sound, which really grabs you right away. And then it shows you how to construct a really clever heavy metal riff. And let's add a hi-hat.
Right.
Let's add the kick drum. Here's the bass guitar. Right? Isn't that the way that goes? And now we're the build. And it's kind of funny because if you just break down the intro of that song, it's not the standard issue eighth notes that we got used to later on.
Right.
But it still gave you a good sense of like, that's what those tones are like. And I think that might be more defining as far as what classic heavy metal is than certainly things that you hear today, which to me I get a little lost just because the tuning goes way below the floor, and I love low end, but I have no idea what we're tuned to anymore.
So does the gridding.
Is the what?
The gridding on the grid.
The gridding. Oh yeah, the gridding goes right. Yeah.
on camera.
Uh-oh. All right, I'm ready when you are.